Hello, welcome pen friends. Welcome to the first video in the Viewer's Choice 3 series. You guys voted on these inks, and the first one today is, or for this series, is November Rain by Diamine. It is a Germany exclusive, and it was sent by pen friend with this initials, MW. Thank you very much for the sample. It's a red sheening ink. It's a little bit difficult to capture on camera. It's covered by a lot of red sheen, and so we'll hope for kind of a balance as we go throughout the video. But let's stick it in the test here, the water test. Ooh, look at that. That's interesting. Now, if you see that kind of blue coming out, you'll see that again somewhere else. You'll see that in the visual journal later on. So, wow, that took up a lot of that ink real quick, but we'll let that kind of work on its own over here and get into the Rodeo Goal book. I counted my pages. There's just enough to do this series. Then we're hopping into that new brown one that I got. So here we are. Right here. Now this is Rhodia paper 2, and I had just had that paper out and I kind of had a brain freeze, but I wanted to make sure because I haven't been mentioning that. But this is also 90 gram Rhodia paper, and then I show a sample later that's on the white, that's the 80 gram, and there's not too much difference, but there is some. So I felt like I was into the paper this morning. So, okay, we get a lot of red sheen around the edge of that Tomoya River paper that's taped in, and things are really darkening here, and that happens a lot off of this paper. It just, to my eye, I'm seeing a little more green along with all that dark kind of sheening. So we're just going to have to kind of plod along and see how it changes as we go. But I found it available. I'm in the US, in Texas, and I found it on Amazon for $16.20 for an 80 ml bottle, and then you got free shipping. It looked like the shipping times were quite long, so it must be coming from overseas. And then you could get the 30 ml for $8.28. Same thing, the shipping times were extended out into August, and we're right now as I speak, it's July 25th. 2019. Boy, it's been quite a week, so I'm just kind of catching up with myself. Here's the chromatography, which I thought was really interesting. I mean, it moved pretty good, really fast, and then it becomes this bright green, and then it has that bright blue. So that was really, really interesting to me. I don't know that we'll have much left on that bath test when we get through. So I've got more notebooks than usual, but we'll go through some of the regulars first. Here's the spiral Morman that comes out of Daiso. I'm not sure how you say that. It's a little Japanese dollar store. We don't have one here in town, but friends up north do, and they have been sending me these little notebooks, and they're awesome. So a lot of shading and red sheen on this. In fact, that's about all you can see at first, and especially with working with camera and lighting. I can see some green shining through, and you may be able to, but it's awfully hard. And look at that red sheen. It's just a sheen monster on this paper. Here it is, broad nib and fine nib. There's no trouble with readback because it's dark enough. It does just, the red sheen takes over on certain papers, so we're going to see that, I'm sure. Okay, next is the CVS Caliber notebook. One of my favorite little notebooks. I guess I lost my tags. Okay, I got a 2-page spread here because I had a little glitch, but that is not a trick of the camera. On this CVS Caliber paper, the red sheen completely took over the painted on swatch. Let's see whether it went through. And it barely, it tried to go through. Some of the green maybe seeped through, but it wasn't even a bleed through. So, wow. I'm seeing like every other letter is completely red, and then some are a little green. But I did have a problem with this. It may have been at the end of a dip, so I re-dipped and retested, and it did come out a little darker on the redip tested part in the broad nib. All of this page is broad nib, and then just this lower half is in the Lamy fine nib. So it again, on this paper, just lots of red sheen, and it sort of takes over, and then it causes the ink to darken, and just at first glance or through a camera and lighting, you're going to see it really dark. But, you know, I like it anyway. I'm just not sure. I don't think this paper would be the paper for it. I actually think Clairfontaine would be, because it felt dry, and even after the retest and everything, and, you know, admitting that maybe it was time for the dip, for the serendipity, I just felt like, yeah, this paper's not really suitable for this ink. That's all. That's my personal opinion. Here's the Leuchtturm little pocket-sized dot grid 1917 paper. And it becomes a little more green on here, which is very hard to capture. But the red sheening is not as prevalent on the Leuchtturm. And that was true for both the broad nib and the fine nib. And it was there, but it was subtle, and it acted more as shading rather than sheen, where, you know, that red just, it just sort of alternated and gave you a little variation. And it didn't go through except for just a tiny bit where it was painted on heavily. So, I don't know. I still think the next paper here might be your best bet. This, rather than use those larger, the Clairfontaine pages that I've been using that are French ruled, I dug out this little notebook, which hasn't been popular with me in my traveler's notebook because it just is kind of stiff. And I just felt like it was too small because it didn't, you know, it didn't open right. So I'm going to use it for this. And it actually, I think that's going to work out well. There's a lot of red sheen on the painted on part. And then you see that on the letters too. You see quite a bit of red coming through, an awful lot. But it just felt nice and smooth. The ink flowed on this paper better. And of course, this is 90 GSM Clairfontaine paper, so you can't really beat it. And then here's the fine nib here. You know, plenty of visibility and readability. You lose quite a bit of the red sheen, and you don't get very much shading on the fine nib. But let's see how it did as far as, and it didn't go through at all, so that's really nice. Okay, and then I also have a notebook to show you the 52 GSM Tomoya River paper. This is from Birmingham Pens in Pennsylvania, and I thought that would be nice. It'll give a page for each of our tester inks, and I like it this way. So, wow, look at that red sheen. It just went nuts. And it did so throughout the writing, especially in the broad nib. I mean, to my eye, even looking through the camera, that's what we're seeing, is so much more red than green that it takes over. So if you really love green, I don't know whether this color would do it for you. It just depends on what you're going to write on and what your nib is, because you're losing quite a bit of the green. But yet it's so neat. And if you love sheen, if you love that red kind of coming through, then this would be the ink for you for sure. So there's that, and we'll keep it handy because we're going to compare. Now we're doing a different order. This is the Tomoya River 68 GSM on Live Notes by Pen Gallery, little insert booklet. And here it is. Let's see, we'll try to not get interfered by that other color. It had a lot of red sheen as well. And all the way through on the nib and on the painted part, and even in the fine nib. So really, really interesting what it did. Let's see whether it went through. No bleed through whatsoever. No shadowing or ghosting, and no bleed through for sure. So let's look at them together. That might be just a little easier, since we are now dealing with Tomoya River paper in both instances, but they're both the ivory kind of color. You know, they're not. We're not comparing white with ivory. The only difference is this is dot grid, the 68 GSM. So again, a lot of red is coming through, and it's very difficult to capture on the camera with my setup, with my equipment. So, but it wrote smoothly, and it was a pleasure to write on these Tomoya River papers with this ink. So that was good. Now, we still do have a few paper samples, but I cut them down so maybe we could see them a little bit better. This is the Rhodia dot pad 80 gram, and I painted that on there, and it's turning, it looks so dark. you know, but to the regular eye, you still see some green, just not very much. And it didn't go through at all, or it doesn't really shadow or ghost too badly either. It looks nice. I'd be perfectly happy writing on the back. So that was broad nib in the Yowo, and then the fine nib in the Lamy. So nice. And then we've got two different copy papers. We'll start with the premium one, the real thick one. This is the Hewlett Packard Laser Premium 32-pound copy paper. And that held the ink really well. And you're still getting green, but it's dark, dark. And you pretty much almost lose the sheening. So your redness doesn't come through the same at all. Not even on the painted on part. But it doesn't go through at all. It behaves very much like the Clairfontaine. So this is an option for you. And then I got the really cheap Georgia Pacific 20-pound copy paper out to do the test. And it flattens on here, and it does an awful lot of feathering. Just really pretty obvious feathering here, where it just spreads out from the letter, makes it look too thick. And then in the fine nib, it's a little more acceptable. You know, it may look a little fuzzy. If you get it and really look at it close, you can see some feathering, but not too bad. And then it surprised the heck out of me that it didn't go through. So that was something that those of you who are stuck with copy paper at work need to know. But you also need to know that if you want it for the red sheening, then it pretty much goes away. You just get a tiny bit of dark, you know, hints of red, but it isn't enough really to make it worth it if that's what you're after. Then you'd probably be better off with the regular green. Okay, so let's stop in and see this. Wow, it's acting very typical for fountain pen ink. It's, you know, we're not going to be able to read that. Whoops, I think it's upside down. You could see the faint outline at this point still, and you could see an outline of the letters a little, but not enough. I really think my prediction would be not going to be able to read it. Okay, let's get out the comparison panel. We've got, I don't have very many dark green inks at all, and I certainly don't have any that sheen like this one. So right in the middle is our Diamine November Rain, today's ink, and around it are what I have that come anywhere near the family, the color family. And I got a few surprises. I was pretty blown away by how much Monteverde California Teal reminded me of it. And yet it's definitely different. It's not as dark. California Teal is not as dark. But it's got that green and less sheening, so you wouldn't have to deal with that if you're not into that. And then, gosh, going into the darker, the Robert Oster River of Fire is quite dark down here on the right in the bottom. That was interesting, and it has a lot of complexity too. Because I think that Diamine November Rain really is a complex ink, and it's got some interesting stuff that happened on the visual journal I'll show you next. But really, I don't have that many greens in general. And so then when you get into the darker and red sheening inks, that puts it even fewer. But Monteverde Yosemite Green is greener, kind of brighter, so that might satisfy someone who was looking for that. And then Tasha Midori, well, that's pretty straightforward green. That even kind of comes close to like KWZ green number 5, I think it is. That's kind of my standard green. I should have pulled that one out just to compare. I should have one real handy here. I got my little box. Yeah, I should have pulled that one out. Yeah, here it is. Okay. So I got a whole box of inks, but so see, that's even greener and more of a traditional green, so it's so far away. But sometimes it's helpful to look at that and see how they compare. Once they're all together, you see different things. Okay, what else is, okay, Diamine Magical Forest is a shimmer ink with some nice silvery kind of shimmer and a little bit of sheen as well, kind of green, red that kind of appears. But I'm not as familiar with this in a nib yet, so I need to see it in a nib. And it definitely would be lighter, brighter than November Rain. This November Rain is a very special, unique ink, I think. Unless there's more out there, and you guys will have to tell me, because it isn't in my wheelhouse to know about those really dark colors like that. I did get out Robert Oster Peppermint, because I thought, well, that's interesting. At first glance, you know, it has some stuff in common, and it certainly is a nice dark green. I went through my sample of that so quickly it was ridiculous. So I must have liked it. That's ridiculous. Okay, let's get into looking at the visual journal. I think that will be interesting. A lot of the attributes of the ink really came out in this, and it seemed well suited for it. Not that, I mean, I'm not an artist, so I got to work with it more to get anything close to what someone who knows what they're doing would get. But this is the Nick Stewart technique, sort of. I mean, I'm still learning. I'm more than halfway through his online course that I've been taking. And I liked how this did it up in the sky. It sort of, as it dried, you got a light blue coming out, and green in here, and red sheen around the edging of that, whatever that is, a fireball, I guess. And lots of red sheen that I think I can show you, sort of, if the tripod doesn't fall over. I tried to do kind of a tree, and seems like we got maybe some birds. And so, but what I loved about this was, see how that turquoise comes out? I mean, who knew that would happen, right? That's interesting. And then over here on our little Petri dish experiment, lots and lots of really bright red sheen, which is hard to pick up, but it's there, and it just explodes into different colors. I like when that happens. It's very complex and interests me greatly when that happens. So there you have it. Okay, next in this series is going to be, we're shifting gears and going to Birmingham Southside Market Boysenberry. Very pretty. So this will be next, and thank you very much for joining me. I'd love to hear what you think about this Diamine November Rain. It's beautiful, and it's got all that red sheen, so anybody who loves red sheen definitely wants to look into that one. And I've really been enjoying my sample, so thank you to the pen friend who sent that. And I will see you back here very soon. Thank you. Bye for now.